Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm gonna I'm gonna start out with just the basics about the College and Career Center here at Marshall. So that's a picture of what it looks like. It's right in the main lobby. So come on in and say hi if you're ever in school. Be glad to talk if I'm not in a meeting or anything else. Absolutely happy to. You can always email me to set up a time to talk. These are the major things that I do to help students. It's tonight we're obviously focusing on financial aid. Uh, so in regards to that, I help students kind of with their whole and parents through the whole college search, picking colleges that are good for them, what they want in terms of academic programs or social fit, part of the country, all of that thing. And one of the most important things that people, I think, kind of discount or don't take seriously enough in the beginning of the research process is how much do you want to spend on college and college affordability. And so I'm glad to help parents and students research colleges that are within, hopefully within a certain budget, or that offer certain types of aid, help people look for scholarships, and all those kinds of things. Also, some related other things you can see here on the slide that offer, jobs so students can earn some of their own money, volunteering opportunities, test prep, other things like that. Tonight's program will be, as I said, recorded, and the slides will also be up on this website right here. You can see at the bottom. If you just Google GCM College and Career Center, that's where the school presentations are, as long as some of the resources like handouts and things like that um, that you might use throughout the year on different topics. And so we also have our other evening programs there as well. Sorry about that. Okay, so going into a little bit more about kind of the types of help, going back here, we talked about the presentations. Another great resource is Naviance. That's the school's college and career website. That's what we use to actually track where we send your seniors transcripts and where they're applying to colleges. It also has a lot of career assessments and some career tools on it, which are very good. And you can also see some financial aid or cost information for colleges on there, but it's best to get that most up-to-date information from the college websites themselves. Naviance is mostly good more, I would say, for admissions information, especially acceptance histories of Marshall students. Um, okay, so next up, one thing I do want to say, especially if you want some one-on-one help, say your FAFSA gets complicated, it's the first one you've done, maybe, or you have to do a CSS profile, which only some schools require, but we do have one-on-one help from experienced financial aid volunteers. I mean, they're staff that work for the official nonprofit partner of Fairfax County Public Schools, but all the help is free. It's called College Access Fairfax. And so they call them financial aid champions to help people do the FAFSA and actually work on the forms. I think, have people who speak at least, I want to say Spanish and Korean. You check their site to see if they offer any other languages as well. But if you follow this link and you go to their site, you can see there's a request form to get one-on-one help, or if you just want to watch some of their events, they have some on demand, and you can go to others live and ask questions that have to do with filling out the financial aid forms and looking for scholarships. So those are very helpful. A couple other things I want to point out. If you have any other kids, the colleges, we're just winding up our visit season. So we had like 120 colleges come here, and those are very useful, good times to ask about scholarships and financial aid. If they have different deadlines or certain things that students should go for, those are posted in Naviance, the college visit calendar, and juniors and seniors can go, and it's every fall. Um, Another thing I'll really put a plug in for is net price calculators. I can show you how to use these sometimes if you want, but they're nice, anonymous, quick. I'm talking about 5, 6 minutes. They don't record your name. If you don't want them to, you can do it as an anonymous guess. And they're on the website of every college, and you can use it to begin your financial research of a college. And Mr. Spencer may talk more about this, but they're often are adapted by a college to work in their own scholarship formula as well. And they're a better predictor than just kind of looking at average numbers. Well, we give this average amount of aid or something like that on some of these sites. You can put in your own family information, again, anonymous, but only takes about 5 minutes to at least start to get an estimate of what it might cost at that college. And it usually includes merit scholarships, which are based on grades. So those can be helpful. All right. That last one is just another website that I like to use sometimes. Um, Here are two specific things offered by that nonprofit group called College Access Fairfax. They have a nice webinar that goes through line by line, and they also have a good, more detailed look at searching for scholarships. Those are both on demand, and they have live sessions for questions on their website. You just go to that bottom link there that has events at the end, and that will show you their calendar as well. Okay, just a couple more things I want to show you. This is my to find out kind of on average how much schools give in, say, need-based aid versus merit, maybe merit aid, and their own money, kind of the college's own money versus the government money they give out. This is a good site called College Navigator. It's not a private site. It's all populated with government information collected by the Department of Education, but you can get some good averages here, and you can see some things which I think are helpful to look at which colleges give how much types of aid. And I can help anyone look through those sometimes if you ever want it. Next up, a good place to look for scholarships. The first place, well, this is the College Board, the SAT people, but they also have a good scholarship section, and they do have some information on costs as well, as you can see there, a couple different kinds. I would say for scholarships, the College Board people are good. Naviance is even better, though, for scholarships because those are more local, less competition. I have a number of these guides, and I use them to help come up with ideas. Unfortunately, there is no one great book that just, has the perfectly laid out list with all the data you want to find, say, colleges within a certain price range, for a family like yours. But these are a starting point. You can get some lists of colleges that are good for this financial aid or that kind of scholarship, and it can head off in a direction. Usually, you have to do quite a bit more of your research if you want to save some serious money. It makes sense, but it will pay you back many times over. Because if you start to do things like look at those net price calculators, go on the college's own websites and look for scholarships that may fit your student well, that could really pay you back well. So these are some good starting places. Another tool I like to use is the New York Times. Everyone gets 10 free articles. You could use this as one of your 10. And they have a nice search by price, sticker price, and net price by income. And you can build some rankings right there. So, and this will all be on the presentation you can access from our site. But again, the best place for scholarships. So this would be winning money that you could use at any college, by a nonprofit or a company or whatever. You can start looking for these in any grade. Most of them are for seniors, but Naviance, which parents have access to, it's your parent view login. Students get there usually through Schoology, but they use their student login, the regular one. So Naviance is great for local scholarships. I would always start there. It pulls some in from other places too, but they've all been vetted, and you're not going to get a lot of spam. And there are ones that our students do win, so that's a great place to start. After that, you only need, I think, probably one major scholarship website, and that would be the College Board one is good for that, especially if you want to go deeper into one type of scholarship, say it's for certain type of music or academic interests or something. And then the last thing is a worksheet to help kind of ask you some questions, which could channel or focus your search in the right direction. So you're not just applying to general scholarships for, say, decent grades, or somebody who volunteers, that scholarships that everybody could go for that are harder to win. But okay, so that's an overview of kind of some of the resources from me. And I will stop sharing and show you my excellent background, share my excellent background with you right there. So I do encourage you to use that information. I'll put my email here in the chat. You could always schedule an appointment with me sometime throughout the year. It's totally fine with or without your child. But I'll be happy to talk with you. So right now, I'll kick it over to Mr. Chad Spencer from Center College, and he'll talk about the college side of it. Welcome, Mr. Spencer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. It's a pleasure to be asked back again to present this information. And thank you to those of you who've chosen to take an hour or so out of your evening to learn more about financial aid. We're going to spend approximately an hour or so together talking about all things financial aid. So what you should expect is that we're going to start from the ground floor and that we're going to build very quickly as we move through the content of tonight's presentation. I am the Vice President of Enrollment Management at Centre College, which is a fine, outstanding liberal arts college in central Kentucky, just south of Lexington. I've been with Centre for about 2 years. I spent the 18 years prior to my time here at Davidson College, just north of Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was the director of financial aid. So I will share with you my professional understanding of this process, but I'll also share with you my personal experience having worked with both of my sons through their college search and selection process. So I'll share some anecdotes and stories about that experience as I move through tonight's presentation. The presentation is set up in such a way to where each slide asks a question, and then I will set out to respond to the question. So I imagine many of you have come into tonight's program with questions in mind, and I imagine we'll cover most of those, but we will reserve a little time at the end of tonight's program for a question and answer session. So you can drop those questions into the chat or the Q&A function, and we will get to those before we part ways around 7 o'clock tonight. What topics will we cover tonight? You can see here the list of 5, and we'll dig into each of these deeply, beginning with need-based financial aid. I've learned in my 25 years of working within a financial aid operation that most colleges are dedicating their financial aid resources towards need-based aid for families. So we're going to talk about how you apply for that aid, what colleges are doing with the data that you're providing within financial aid applications, how those colleges are analyzing and processing it to ultimately determine the student's eligibility for financial aid grants and programs. Then we'll shift gears and talk merit-based scholarships. I have found that merit-based scholarships can be an effective way to help pay for college. So we're going to talk about how students can position themselves to be strong candidates for those merit-based scholarships and awards. Then we'll touch upon federal aid programs, including student loans and work. We'll talk about alternative financing options that may be available for your family. And then we'll close our time with a list of some consumer tips that I believe will be helpful as you navigate the process ahead. How do students apply for need-based financial aid? Well, before we get into talking about the application process, first note on the left-hand side of the screen that you must reapply annually. So each year that the student's going to be enrolling into college, the student and the family will apply for need-based aid. And for most families, that process begins and sometimes ends with the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. Nearly every college and university in the country will collect the FAFSA from the student applying for aid because nearly all of us award federal financial aid. And in order to determine the student's eligibility for those federal aid programs, we must collect the FAFSA to determine that eligibility. For those of you with seniors at home, if you have not already, please visit studentaid.gov and do a couple of things. One is establish an account. Both you and your student will need to establish a username and also a federal ID that will allow access to the FAFSA and other resources. Once you establish an account, then you will begin the process of actually completing and ultimately submitting the FAFSA to the colleges and universities where your student is seeking admission. The FAFSA goes live around October 1st each year. This year it actually opened a few days prior to October 1. But parents of younger students, I think it's a good idea for you to put in your phones for future use a reminder set to October 1st to remind you that the FAFSA has gone live. And that's the point at which you may complete and submit the FAFSA on behalf of your student and your family. The FAFSA is going to collect income and asset information from both the student and the student's parents. And in the course of completing the FAFSA, you will reach a point at which you will be able to connect your FAFSA record to your IRS tax record, which allows for the automated flow of your tax data directly from the IRS into the FAFSA. So that eliminates any possibility of error within the income section of the FAFSA. I'm often asked the question of who completes the FAFSA along with the students. Well, I can tell you that in cases of biological or adoptive parents being married and or living together, then the biological or adoptive parents will be submitting their financial data along with the student. In cases of divorce or separation, then the responsible party is going to be the parent who provides the greatest level of financial support to the student. They will be providing their financial data along with the student within that FAFSA form. Some of you may encounter a financial aid application called the CSS Profile. The CSS Profile is a College Board product. You may access it at the website on this slide, cssprofile.collegeboard.org, and you can review there all of the colleges and universities who require the CSS Profile. Because unlike the FAFSA, not all colleges and universities require the CSS Profile. Center College is one of those that does collect it. We require it in addition to the FAFSA, and it is used primarily to determine the student's eligibility for Center College's institutional scholarships and financial aid. The CSS Profile, just like the FAFSA, asks income and asset related questions, but it also asks for some expense related information, and it also gives families the ability to provide a narrative in cases where there may be some extenuating financial circumstances that the family is working through at that point in time. At the college or university's discretion, they may collect tax returns, tax transcripts, and other federal tax return documents like W-2s. And in cases of divorce or separation, those of us who collect the CSS Profile may require the other parent, so call the non-custodial parent, to submit a CSS Profile so that we can determine both biological or adoptive parents' ability to contribute towards college expenses. That's the application process. Let's move forward and talk about how we determine eligibility for financial aid. So once the financial aid applications are submitted, colleges will be on the receiving end of those financial aid applications, and then we'll work to determine the student's financial need and eligibility for financial aid. We'll begin with the cost of attendance, and we'll subtract from that the family contribution, or what's called the Student Aid Index, which is derived from the FAFSA and the CSS Profile data. We'll also subtract any outside assistance the student is expecting to receive from things like outside scholarship organizations. The result is the student's financial need for 1 year, keeping in mind again that this is an annual process. Let's take this equation and break it down by each of the components, beginning with that total cost of attendance. And when I say cost of attendance, I'm talking sticker price. So all inclusive, which includes both direct and indirect expenses for attending the college or university. Direct expenses are those that are going to be billable from the college or university for things like tuition and fees. And also, if the student's living on campus, for their housing and for their meal plan. I can tell you that in cases where the student is living off campus, they will have their housing and meals expenses shift from direct expenses to indirect, meaning the college or university may no longer be the ones billing the student for the housing and for their meals. So the student may be living in an apartment and paying the apartment manager each month, and they may be purchasing their meals and groceries from sources other than the college or university. So that housing and meals line can shift from direct to indirect expense. Other indirect expenses include things like books and supplies that the student will be purchasing, whether they're purchasing them in the bookstore or from some third-party vendor. The books and supplies are going to cost something, so we will include an allowance within the total cost of attendance. Also, if students are traveling to and from their college campus, and particularly if they are traveling a great distance, you all are in the greater Washington, D.C. area, If your students decide they're going to attend college on the West Coast, that means they're going to be boarding an airplane to move to and from their college campus. So colleges are going to include an allowance for transportation that is based upon how far the student is going to have to travel to and from that campus. And lastly, miscellaneous personal expenses will be included, or at least an allowance for miscellaneous personal expenses within the total cost of attendance. And a way to view miscellaneous personal expenses is as those expenses that allow the student to lead a standard college going student lifestyle. The second part of our equation was outside resources. And what are they? Well, simply put, they're funds from sources other than the college or university. And I provide to you a very short list of the sources from which these funds may come. My advice to you, and Mr. Humphreys touched upon this a little bit during his remarks, is to begin the search for outside scholarships near home, where the student attends school, where parents typically work, where they and you are involved in community. The student is likely to find themselves to be eligible for more scholarships near their home than they are if they're searching at that regional, state, or national level. Outside resources can be financially beneficial, and in some cases, colleges may allow them to meet unmet need, which is the difference between a family's calculated financial need and what the college or university is offering in financial aid. Also, many colleges will award student loans or student work study as a part of the financial aid package. And in cases where outside scholarships or resources are received by the student, they may use those scholarships or resources to potentially reduce or replace loans or work within the greater aid award. And some colleges may allow outside resources to stack on top of all other awarded aid, thus directly reducing the family's contribution towards those educational expenses. How is the family contribution determined? Well, I've shared that this is derived from the FAFSA and or the CSS profile. The FAFSA result is going to be called the Student Aid Index, or SAI. The CSS profile result is referred to as the expected family contribution, or the EFC. They are essentially the same thing. You can see the four components of resources that feed into this SAI/EFC. And we're going to talk about first the student contribution. Most students who are going directly from high school into college have earned very limited income, if in fact they've earned any income at all. So I have, in my experience, come to recognize that students are rarely generating a contribution from the income they have earned in high school. They must earn more than approximately $3,500 to begin generating a contribution from their earnings. Student assets will be reported as you are applying for financial aid for the student in the form of checking accounts, savings accounts, and other assets that the student owns or for which they are a co-owner. So students will be reporting the value of these assets within the financial aid applications, and then the total of those assets will be assessed with an expectation that the student will contribute 20 to 25% of the total asset value. So if the student has $1,000 in a savings account, they should expect that 200 to 250 of the $1,000 will become a part of their contribution towards their own college expenses. So the student will have some skin in the game as it relates to paying for their own college expenses. Parents, as it relates to your assets, the first thing to know is your retirement assets are off limits for financial aid purposes. So if you've been contributing towards retirement accounts, be it 401k, 403b, anything that's a traditional retirement account, the principal balance is off limits. Your non-retirement assets will be treated as available assets for financial aid purposes. And you should expect that on average, perhaps 5 to 6% of parental assets will become a part of the expected family contribution. So it's a relatively small piece of the pie at 5 to 6% for most families. And then finally, when it comes to parent income, I have found that this is what's generating the bulk of the expected family contribution. This is very much an income driven process. And for most families, it's going to be the adjusted gross income that's generating the bulk of the family contribution. So to provide a visual, this slide illustrates how the parent contribution, our greenish block, and the student contribution, the blue block, come together to equal the total family contribution from the year, in this case, or for the year, the orange block. Now, some of you may be wondering, what about college savings plans, things like 529s and other college savings plans? How are they treated in this process? When you are applying for financial aid, please report the value of the college savings plan or 529 plan as the asset of the plan owner. In nearly every case, I've found that the plan owner is the parent or the parents of the student. So you are to report the value of the plan as such, as yours. In most cases, the student is the beneficiary of the plan. They're not the owner of the plan. If you own multiple 529 plans or other college savings plans, you're to report the total value of all of the college savings plans you own, even if the beneficiaries are other people other than the student who will be college going. What about cases where the owner is someone other than the student or the parent? How are they to be reported? When you're applying for financial aid, you're not going to be reporting the plan value of a college savings plan that's owned by someone other than the student or the parent. However, if a distribution is made from the plan that's owned by some other person to provide for coverage of the student's college going expenses, then when you're reapplying for financial aid in a future year, you are to report that distribution as having been received by the student. Shifting gears, let's talk about merit-based scholarships for a few minutes. And when I say institutional merit-based aid, I'm talking about the college or university who's funding the merit-based scholarships. Also, in this context, we are talking about merit-based scholarships where need is not a consideration as it relates to the awarding of the merit-based scholarships. Parents, I think it's a wise idea for you and for your student to do a little homework and visit the college websites of the places where your student's applying for admission, and work to understand whether or not the colleges and universities offer merit-based scholarships, because not all do. Secondly, understand what it is that they're rewarding. What is the scholarship recognizing? What are the strengths, the talents that the students must have in order to be strong candidates for the merit-based scholarship? Once you figure those two things out, then work to understand the procedures for being considered. What must the student do in order to enter into that applicant pool or those applicant pools? In some cases, the student must be nominated for a scholarship. In others, the student has to complete a scholarship application. And if there's a scholarship application, there will be deadlines associated, and the student is likely going to have to submit additional materials. So it's a wise idea to have as much time as possible to meet those deadlines and submit the application. And then lastly, the admission application may also serve as a scholarship application. What else should students know about merit-based scholarships? Again, not all offer merit-based scholarships. And what I have found is that the colleges and universities that are most selective offer fewer merit-based opportunities than colleges and universities that are less selective. And colleges are going to decide how to best allocate their resources, oftentimes based upon a philosophy of access and affordability, meaning Many will choose to dedicate most or all of their financial aid resources toward need-based financial aid programs as they work to allow students from all financial backgrounds to access their community. I found that powerful scholarship candidates present well-crafted admission and scholarship applications. They also follow through, meaning they demonstrate genuine interest in the college. They visit campus if they are able. They meet with college representatives when they visit the high school campus. They respond to emails and take the time to explore the website and understand the college community they're applying to. A popular question among students is, Mr. Spencer, how do I distinguish myself among the thousands of students who are applying for admission and scholarships? That's really difficult to do. And while I agree that it's difficult to do, my response has always been and will continue to be genuine and be authentic as you are presenting yourself within the admission and financial aid applications. Only you can be you. So be exactly who you know yourself to be. And also, as I often had to remind my youngest son, who's a junior in college right now, continue working hard all the way through the finish line, right? Finish strong so that the college or university who's considering the student for the scholarship sees that the student is continuing to challenge themselves all the way to the finish. What about athletic scholarships? Athletic scholarships are awarded by the athletics department, not by the financial aid office. So the coaches are the ones who make those decisions. Athletic scholarships tend to renew annually. And yes, sometimes they can be full scholarships, and that's great in cases where full scholarship awards are offered and accepted. But most scholarships are actually partial scholarship awards, meaning they're for some amount less than the total cost of attendance. And there are also many, many colleges who offer athletic programs and competition, but who don't offer athletic scholarships to students. The NCAA Division III is the primary example of institutions who offer athletics, but do not offer athletic scholarships. If your student is offered a scholarship, be it merit or athletic, please ask questions. And I've provided here 3 questions that I believe everyone should ask in the case of a scholarship being offered. Always lead with asking whether or not the scholarship's renewable. Right? Is it for 1 year? Is it for 2 years? Or is it for 4 years? Most scholarships are renewable and they're for 4 years, but don't leave it to chance. Ask the question, get the answer. If the scholarship's renewable, what are the requirements? Must the student maintain a minimum grade point average? Must they complete a minimum number of community service hours? Must they live on campus, or must they spend a semester or more studying abroad? So work to understand what's required of the students so that they can meet those annual renewal requirements. And also ask if the scholarship will impact or affect need-based financial aid eligibility. The answer may be a simple no. It doesn't impact need-based aid eligibility. But if it does, you're going to want to know how so that you can plan appropriately. Now let's talk about how financial need is met. We've talked about need-based grants. We've talked about merit-based scholarships. Those 2 forms of aid are gift aid, meaning they do not have to be repaid, nor do they have to be earned. There is also what's called self-help aid, and this is provided in the form of work study or student employment, which has to be earned by the students, or awarded through student loans, often awarded through federal loan programs. So in the case of loans, of course, those loans have to be repaid at some point in the future. So let's take gift aid, self-help aid, and talk about how colleges bring those resources together in order to make their education affordable for families. What might sample aid packages look like? What we have on this slide is 4 sample aid award packages for 4 different institutions, all at varying cost of attendance or sticker price points. So you'll notice on the top line, the cost of attendance line, we have 70,000 for center, nearly 90,000 at private number two, 57,000, which is around the national average for private number three, and then our public university example with a total cost of attendance of $34,000. And when I say cost of attendance, again, we're talking tuition and fees, housing and meals, books and supplies, transportation allowance, and miscellaneous personal expenses. The student aid index, again, derived from the FAFSA, is $20,000 in this case. And it's the one constant on this screen, $20,000 all the way across each of our four columns here. We've all collected the same data. We've all applied the same formula. So we've all generated the same result. The financial need, line number three, is variable because our cost of attendance is variable. If we take Center College first, we see $50,340 in calculated financial need. We see a $26,000 merit scholarship, which is annually renewable as long as the student remains in good academic standing. We also see a need-based grant for $16,840. So remember, merit scholarships, need-based grants, both gift aid, meaning they do not have to be repaid, nor do they have to be earned. We are also seeing for Center a $5,500 student loan through the Federal Stafford Loan Program. First-year students are able to borrow up to $5,500 as long as they complete a FAFSA. That's really the only requirement, and be enrolled on a full-time basis. So $5,500 student loan, a $2,000 work-study job. The student will have to work approximately 8 hours a week to earn $2,000 per year on my campus. So the total aid award is $50,340, which matches the financial need, leaving $0 in unmet need. Center College is one of approximately 75 colleges and universities in the country that meets 100% of calculated need for all of its students. So that's how we provide access to our high-priced education. We meet 100% of calculated need for everyone. So this family will pay the $20,000 student aid index, and the student will repay the loan and the interest beginning 6 months after they graduate from college, or from Center in this case. Now, looking at private number two, we see $69,500 in financial needs. This is a higher need case. $0 in merit-based aid. This is a highly selective college that does not award merit-based scholarships. However, we see a need-based grant of $66,500 and a work-study award of $3,000. There is no student loan included because this is one of approximately 24 colleges in the country that does not award loans as a part of its financial aid model. So it meets 100% of calculated need without loans, leaving $0 in unmet need, and the family paying $20,000 for the academic year. Now, private number three, a lower priced private institution, we see $37,000 in financial need. We're seeing a $23,000 merit-based scholarship, annually renewable, $0 in need-based grant, the $5,500 loan, a $2,500 job, bringing the total aid award to $31,000, which is not equal to the $37,000 in financial need. Meaning, we're seeing for the first time unmet need or a gap in the financial aid award. So that difference between calculated financial need of $37,000 and the total financial aid being offered of $31,000. So in this case, the family will be required to pay more than their family contribution, paying $26,000, and the student will repay the loan and the interest after graduation. And finally, the public university, we see $14,000 in financial need, $0 in merit-based aid, a need-based grant, student loan, and work study, combining for $14,000 in total aid offered, leaving $0 in unmet need, and thus the family paying the $20,000 student aid index and the student repaying the loan and the interest later. Now, we focused most of our time in the middle section of the slide where we find the gift aid and the self-help aid. What I encourage you to do is as your student begins receiving financial aid offers from the colleges and universities where they are offered admission, take all of the data and either enter it into a spreadsheet like this one or scribble it down on a notepad and compare those financial aid offers so that you can ultimately understand the bottom line of what your family will be required to pay. I don't know what type of consumer you may be, but for me, I like to understand the the bottom line. Ultimately, what am I going to have to pay for the service of the product I'm seeking? We're now in the home stretch. So once you determine how much you have to pay for college, what are the loan options that are available? Well, we already talked about the federal direct Stafford loan program for students. They must complete a FAFSA in order to be eligible to borrow. Some students may choose to explore private education loans through alternative lenders. I would caution, however, uh, you to take the time to research well the terms of those private education loans and think about some of the challenges the student may face with repayment if they borrow beyond the amount available to them through the federal Stafford loan programs. Parents, if you complete a FAFSA and if you are interested and determined to be credit worthy, then you may borrow through the Federal Direct Plus Loan program. You can borrow up to $20,000 a year for your undergraduate student and up to $65,000 across their undergraduate experience if you wish. And then there may be other options available to you based upon your individual circumstances. The Federal Direct Plus Loan program interest rate is over 9%. So it may be a wise idea to think about other options if, in fact, you plan to finance a portion of your students' college expenses through borrowing. And as you think about the payment options you have and you think about the investments in your child's future through their college experience, please know that most families are using a combination of a number of ways to pay their share of college expenses. In cases where families have saved, then of course that can be a really effective way to pay for college. Most will likely pay some portion of the cost of attendance from current earnings. We just talked about the borrowing options that students and families may have available to them. So, of course, that comes with future repayment. And we've focused most of our time tonight on scholarships and grants. So, if you are like most families I have worked with, or if you're like my family personally, you're likely to use some combination of these ways to pay for your child's college going expenses. Mr. Humphreys touched upon net price calculators already, but I just want to reiterate if your student is thinking about a binding early decision application plan to a college or university, absolutely take the time to complete the net price calculators on the college websites of those places where they are considering a binding early decision agreement. We're all required to have net price calculators available on our websites. It allows you to enter your income and asset and other household information into it and then receive in return an estimate or a projection of the net cost of sending your students to our college or university. So I strongly encourage you to take the time to engage with net price calculators. And a few consumer tips as we close. Please avoid scholarship programs and search services that charge fees. Mr. Humphreys shared with you some recommendations of where you may want to explore outside scholarship opportunities. Those are legitimate sources where the student and the family will not be asked to pay in order to have the opportunity to apply for those scholarship programs. If you choose to employ a financial aid consultant, know that that person or those people are not going to have some uh, next level understanding of where to access financial aid resources. I'd instead strongly encourage you to keep the money in your pocket for later use and instead call the financial aid offices where your student's applying for admission. There are people behind this process who are happy to answer your questions and provide the good counsel and guidance you need to work through this process. Some colleges may be willing to negotiate financial aid awards, but certainly not all of them. So if you inquire about negotiating an aid award, don't be offended if a college or university tells you that they've done all they can possibly do as far as awarding financial aid to your students. Please take the time to understand your loans well before signing the promissory notes. Include your student in this process. I sat down with my kids to complete their FAFSAs on a Sunday afternoon. Each fall, we just sit down, and that way they were able to see the questions that were being asked of them and then what we were entering into their financial aid applications. And keep the communication lines open with the financial aid offices where your student chooses to enroll into college. They're going to be there for 4 years to help your student along their path towards graduation. We are all intent upon graduating students on time so that they can leave our college communities prepared to go out and make contributions in the ways that they wish. So, there I'm going to leave it with a thank you again for taking the time to tune in tonight. I think we've managed to touch upon quite a bit in our short time together, but I do want to hand it back over to Mr. Humphreys so we can work through a little Q&A. So, Mr. Humphreys, back to you, sir.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Um, Great. So we can take some questions now. We have one posted on the chat. The chat should be open, so you can, if you have a question, just put it in there. The first question was back during those estimates and the cost of attendance, and it was if a student's SAI is higher than a school's total cost of attendance, does that mean they will likely get no need-based aid? And the SAI is the Student Aid Index. So, Mr. Spencer, you want to take that one?
Right. So, the answer is yes, you're correct. If the family's ability to pay is greater than the total cost of attendance, then there will not be need-based aid included in the financial aid package. However, there very well could be merit-based aid included. And if you file a FAFSA, the student may borrow through the federal Stafford Loan Program, regardless of the student's eligibility for need-based aid. So they may borrow a non-need-based loan through the Stafford Loan Program if they wish to finance a portion of their education through that option.
And if for those of you who don't have all the acronyms memorized already, the SAI was that's the number that is the big number spit out at the end of your FAFSA that kind of says we believe your family ought to be able to afford this amount each year for education. So you want that number to be the lower the number that number is the better in terms of need-based aid. Anyway.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? Questions about the CSS profile, looking for scholarships, the FAFSA. Well, that's when you know you have an informative presentation. All right. Well, unless anyone thinks of while we're wrapping up here, if you go to the top of the chat, that's where the link to where the presentation will be by the end of tomorrow. I just have to format the recording and post it up there. That's the link for Center College, where Mr. Spencer is from. They also have a net price calculator on their website as well. And that's my email right there in case you want to schedule a time to meet with me. So I want to thank you very much for joining us, and do be in touch, and go Statesman. Thank you very much, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Gardner. Take good care.
You too.